What is crack, everyone? It's Nathan here, aka the Rambling Kern, and head instructor of Kern School of Combat. So like I said, back to a little bit more regular with the videos. So this week's one, as again you'd know from the title and the thumbnail, I want to discuss stances and guards. Now this is something that I see argued about a lot, and I recently had a very good conversation with a friend and fellow martial arts instructor from a different style about this topic. And I think this is something that, due to the nature of some traditional martial arts, has kind of become its own thing. And I think for a lot of people involved in combat arts and other arts, this gets viewed in a very skewed and kind of questionable light. And what I mean by that is, the best analogy I've ever seen given of guards and stances is that if you were to film a fight or have a camera on burst mode and just took pictures over and over and over, let's say like a kickboxing fight, and took it over and over and over, you would see a lot of traditional guards and stances that you would see in a number of different martial arts. However, the issue is a lot of traditional martial arts don't tend to do those sort of full contact sparring situations. So as a result, you don't really tend to see the guards being applied as such. Now that's obviously not a hard and fast rule. Different styles do things differently. But I thought this really interesting because if you look at snapshots of a fight, you will see these moments arise and you'll kind of think to yourself, how did that happen, or how did we get there? And when you actually see the context of how it happened and how it arose, you're like, okay, that makes sense. So for people who have done traditional fencing arts, for example, especially a lot of the HEMA people, I know if you would watch our channel, you will see these very stylized guards in a lot of manuals, and I'll bring up some of those on screen. And often the way I explain these to people, and the way I've had these explained to me, is that often this is a position between positions. So for example, I'll bring up one where the body's completely twisted around and you're basically loading up for a strike. Now this is anyone who's done any sort of combat sport, even if you have done a racket sport, be it like even baseball, even tennis, where you're loading up a position to do a forehand strike, you'll understand the need to like load the body pre to a big swing. Now it doesn't mean you're standing there the entire time waiting. It means you're moving into that position dynamically as things start to move. This is one of the things that you can see these positions even in modern combat sports and MMA and boxing. I know everyone likes to kind of joke about traditional boxing stances where they have this kind of hand forward position. This is something you see in modern striking arts a lot. Like even in Muay Thai, you see that long guard used a lot, which, you know, if you take your hands from here and do this or this, depending on what you want to do, it's basically the same thing. But obviously gloves and everything change that. But again, that's a story for another day. And basically what I wanted to touch on was that often when we talk about the guards or stances in a martial art, I think these get very overly focused on both sides. For one side who, let's say, works on the art side of the martial art, wants to make these look aesthetically pleasing and hold these positions. So for an example would be people who just work on kata. Again, nothing wrong with that. So for those who aren't familiar with kata, it's basically it's kind of stylized set of movements to remember a flow for combination, for example. Obviously those who are more experienced, please do let me know. But generally what you're trying to achieve with that is to not just make a thing that will work, so let's say a combination, but generally what has become, especially with combinations or competitions I should say around those things, is that those series of moves have almost become a dance that have to look aesthetically pleasing. And like I've discussed in previous videos, and in just my last video, that fights aren't pretty. Fights don't tend to look pretty. So when we try to make something look pretty, sometimes you lose out on the reason for the thing that you're trying to achieve. So one of the big ones I find in weapon-based martial arts, now there's all sorts of different terms for this. In traditional Filipino arts, for example, you'll hear this term that comes up a lot, defanging the snake. Now I'm just going to show a knife for this, just because I'm in an attic here, I don't have a huge amount of room to swing stuff. This is a lovely trade knife given to me by my friend Ernest, and we will be doing that comparison series between Native American weapons and Irish weapons. Do stay tuned, it is in the works. But there's a concept of, and you'll see this in bladed arts, you see this in stick arts, a concept called defanging the snake. Basically, the idea being, if I have a weapon out here, for example, like the classic Hollywood of like I'm holding a weapon out here and just staying here, you're going to hit the closest target. So for example, if I was boxing, I'm going to throw my jab and usually aim for the head because it's the closest thing to me. In Muay Thai, I might throw a leg kick because, again, it's the closest thing to me. When we look at weapon arts, the closest thing to you is generally going to be the hand. So if we take a stylized guard, so the classic, Hollywood, fencing pose where the weapon's out in front and the hands up and behind to make it look kind of cool, this is going to get hit constantly, especially if it stays still. And this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. Guards and stances tend to be dynamic. It tends to be moving through different stances, and you end up, like if I, let's say, just wave this knife around and kind of even just move my hand. Let's say I was to draw the alphabet with my hand, go like A, B. If I was to do that, C, D, and if I move my hand around in different positions, as I go through that, you will see if I pause at any moment, I'm going to end up in all these sort of really weird stylized positions. Again, not a position where you'd be like, oh, I'm going to stand here in a fight and advance on someone. But what happens is you end up in these in-between positions. Like I said, it's like taking a series of photos of a fight. Now, often I find people get very focused on, oh no, I have to return to this position or do X, Y, or Z. In weapon arts, generally you need to move a lot to avoid being hit. And that's not just, even if I'm being stationary, I need to actually move my appendages so that they don't get hit. For example, your legs, your hands, your head. But it's almost always the things that are furthest out, which is almost always your hands. And this is something that takes, especially weapon-based, people who've moved in from a striking base, as in an unarmed art, say boxing, kickboxing, whatever. I've had a few guys who've moved from that into stick fighting. Getting used to those ranges is very difficult because the range suddenly goes from what you've always been used to, basically arm's reach, to stick reach, which is almost double or sometimes even triple that, because if you take a step, you will put yourself into that danger zone. And I've talked about this in my ranges video. I'd recommend you have a look at that if you want to kind of see a deeper dive on what I'm talking about with those ranges. Now, what I'm basically getting at with this is, often those stylized stances are a position between positions. So if I load up a strike with this big turned down position, it can look cool, but generally that's me loading up to strike through something and then, have a big deep stance here. Yes, we can pause in those for photographs and make stuff look cool, but generally in a fight, I'm flowing between those. I'm not staying still. And often you'll see debates in various different martial arts circles around, oh, why are you standing like this way, or why are you standing like that? Generally, you're constantly moving your hands in and out. You'll see in my recent sparring videos, you'll see we're constantly trying to hit for the hands, move the hands around to avoid getting hit. And not just avoid getting hit. If you leave a stick, for example, a stick has the unfortunate ability that knives don't, where you can just reach out and grab them. Obviously, if you have a knife and someone pulls it out of your hand or whatever, you're going to have a bad time. But, getting into the habit of using this hand, your what I like to call my complementary hand, that was a term given to me by Mark Denny. You have your dominant hand and your complementary hand. We don't have a good or a bad, we have a good and a better. The idea being that getting used to using your second hand and moving through different stances allows you to be much more difficult to hit and much more elusive. And yes, you will have like ready positions or like guard positions, boxing being an example of hands up high, elbows in, elbows tucked. Mainly that is your basic return to position, and mainly that's a defensive thing. So the thing you always hear about, and I had a great coach who used to say this to me in boxing, of master the basics and then you can forget the basics. People who are really, really good are really good at the basics and then they can do all the cool flashy stuff. But if they don't have the basics down to an absolute T, then there's no point in trying to do the fancy stuff. A lot of people skip through that, try to go do the fancy stuff, and then they just get absolutely clobbered when it comes to someone who's just really, really good at the basics. Same in a stick fight. I've seen guys do amazingly well who just have a simple downward X, who can just swing a stick very, very hard. Or, guys who've done like ball sports where they're just really good at swinging a stick back and forth, and they get very, very scary to get near. So basically, I just wanted to kind of run through the explanations around that and why that is something that you see, I personally, I think is very misinterpreted by a lot of people when it comes to, especially weapon-based arts, that our guards and our ready stances are something that we move through, and generally they're defensively the positions we return to in order to keep ourselves safe. But we don't stay there. They're not stagnant, still positions. We're moving into them as we move around, as we move our hands, as we move the targets, so to avoid being hit. I think this is a big misconception a lot of people have, and it's a really important thing to consider if you're out doing any weapon-based martial art, because you don't want to leave any target out there for any prolonged period of time for people to hit it. It's just the same with boxing. Like if you have your head forward, you're going to get hit. If you're moving your head, keeping your hands up, moving your head around, it gets a lot harder to hit. Same thing if I'm swinging a weapon around. If I just leave my hand out there, it's going to get hit. If I move my hand, even just side to side, it's going to be a lot more unpredictable to hit. Simple stuff, but I think really important stuff to understand, especially for my my viewers who are new to weapon-based arts or don't get to do them a lot, or simply don't spar or don't want to spar. Like I've said, I have no issue with that, but I myself think it's an incredibly valuable tool, and it's something that I think instructors should kind of push to do so that they can kind of deepen their understanding of the arts and why and how those positions work. Yes, so if you guys are interested in classes in Irish martial arts and Irish stick fighting, you will find my links down in the description. If you want to discuss things further with me, discuss techniques one-to-one, or get video feedback on your training, sparring, any of that sort of stuff, you'll find my Patreon down in the description. I aim to be a lot more active with it this year and put out a lot more content to the amazing people who've been supporting me. So if you're interested in that, you will find that down in the description as well. It's basically the cost of a cup of coffee, so really appreciate anyone who can help. And even if you can't, just like and subscribe. Really helps the channel. We've just hit 4,000 subscribers. A huge thank you to every single one of you. This channel just continues to grow and keeps growing, and I really just cannot thank you guys enough. I know I do every week, but thank you. I'm off to train. I hope you guys are doing the same. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you very much, and slán.